Bible Space Time.
In order to understand Daniel chapter 11, you need to understand Daniel chapter 9. The 70 years spoken to Jeremiah. In the first year of Darius the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign I Daniel understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Daniel chapter 9 verses 1-2. Daniel learned the meaning of the 70 years that God spoke to Jeremiah in verse 2, chapter 9. But Daniel was not delighted, as if he found a bigger problem, and started fasting and praying. What led him to do so? The year that Daniel was captured and taken to Babylon was 606 BC. And the time of Daniel chapter 9 verse 1 was 537 BC, and 70 years from 606 is 536, which supposed to be a year before the time to start rebuilding of Jerusalem according to the prophecy. That's why Daniel was in urgent prayer to know more about the reconstruction of Jerusalem. And his prayer must be concerning about the prophecies that he received in chapter 8, because Daniel knew that the timeline of chapter 8 overlaps with the reconstruction of Jerusalem. Daniel's prayers was answered, and Gabriel began to explain the prophecies about the 2,300 days.
The difference between the prophecies of 70 years and 2,300 days. The 70 years is a prophetic time, telling about the future, because Daniel heard about the 70-year prophecy before the 70-year was over, but it cannot be a symbolic time, not like the 2,300 days, because the reconstruction of Jerusalem was a real event, so the 70 years should be interpreted as it is, as 70 year.
Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Daniel 8:13 and 14.
However, the 2,300 days are prophetic and symbolic time, because they are linked to symbolic events, such as daily, and transgression of desolation. So, the 2,300 days prophecy must be interpreted as 2,300 years. For data your principle, please watch the Bible Space Time video 31, part 1 and part 2 how to interpret the time in the prophecy. The time when the reconstruction of Jerusalem was completed, and when Jesus was baptized and died on the cross, can prove that this day-to-year conversion method is true.
Know therefore and understand, that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks, the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the Prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Daniel chapter 9 verses 25-26.
The Messiah the Prince refers to Jesus, so from the time of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem to the time of Jesus, there should be 7 and 62 weeks, which is 483 days, about 1 year and 4 months. And it said, after 62 weeks, which is 62 weeks, shall Messiah be cut off. That means, Jesus will die sometime after the 62 weeks. However, Messiah didn't come in 1 year and 4 months from around that time, and Jerusalem was completed in 408 BC. Jesus was baptized in 27 AD, which is exactly 434 years after the completion of Jerusalem. Therefore it is sure that one symbolic day in a prophecy should be interpreted as 1 year. And it also shows that 7 weeks after the decree was issued, Jerusalem should be completed, and the year Jerusalem was completed is 408 BC. So the year the decree was issued should be in 457 BC. The time periods mentioned in chapter 9 are subdivisions of the 2,300 days, so they should be also treated as symbolic periods, and the year the decree was issued also becomes the beginning of 2,300 years.
3 decrees were treated as one. The year Daniel was taken to Babylon was 606 BC, when the first expedition of Nebuchadnezzar took place. 70 years from 606 becomes 536 BC, and that was the year the first commandment to build Jerusalem was issued. And the elders of the Jews built, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they built and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus, and Darius, and Artaxerxes king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. Ezra chapter 6 verses 14 to 15. And 2 more orders were issued. And according to Ezra chapter 6, the 3 orders were treated as one authority, which means the year that the 3rd order was issued should be taken as the time of the order. And the decree was about to restore and to build Jerusalem, the city, not the temple. The decree of Cyrus was for rebuilding the temple, and the decree of Darius was to enforce the work that had been hindered. And the order of Artaxerxes was to set Jerusalem as an autonomous region by establishing laws and regulations. Therefore the 3rd order is directly connected to restore Jerusalem. So the year 457 BC should be the beginning of the 2300 years. What's important here is that these 3 decrees form a single unit of period. The 70-year spans from 606 BC to 536 BC, the time of the first decree. And the starting year for 2300 years is from the time of the 3rd decree, 457 BC, so we can know the Bible is using the entire period from the 1st to the 3rd decree as one dividing block.
2300 years prophecy. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Daniel chapter 9 verse 24.
70 weeks are 490 years, according to the data your principle we discussed earlier. 490 years from 457 BC is 34 AD. That would be the last year for Jewish people living as God's chosen people. In 34 AD, Stephen was martyred, and the gospel began to spread to Gentile.
And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Daniel chapter 9 verse 26.
Verse 26 said, after 62 weeks, which is after 27 AD, Messiah shall be cut off, which means the death of Jesus, and after that the people of the prince will come to destroy the city and the sanctuary, the Jerusalem and the temple, so the people of the prince should be the army of Roman Empire. And it is said, there will be wars until the end. These are the wars recorded in Daniel chapter 11.
And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Daniel chapter 9 verse 27.
Covenant, in the Bible, is an agreement between God and men, so he who shall confirm the covenant with many refers to Jesus. In the midst of the week is 3.5 years, which brings us to 31 AD, the year that Jesus was crucified. His death made the sacrifice and the oblation useless, because these were just symbols of what is to come, the Messiah. And it talks about the abominations of Desolate as verse 26 did. Verse 26 first talked about the Messiah and then about the people of the prince, the Roman general who shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Verse 27 is also following the same structure, so we can know that the one who shall make the abomination is Rome.
But when ye shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand, then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. Mark chapter 13 verse 14.
Chapter 9 finishes with the warning of coming abomination of desolation. Jesus said, abomination of desolation standing where it ought not, to describe Roman army laying siege of Jerusalem. And he made it clear that he was quoting from the book of Daniel, by adding, spoken of by Daniel. Therefore, the abomination of desolate, written in Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 is Rome.
Daniel chapter 11.
Also I in the 1st year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood to confirm and to strengthen him, and now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grisha. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. Daniel chapter 11 verses 1 to 4.
The four kings after Cyrus the Great are Cambyses II, false Smerdis, Darius I, and Xerxes. The king, Xerxes, is the one in the book of Esther, chapter 2. The mighty king, in verse 3, is Alexander the Great. After his death, his kingdom was divided by four of his generals. Cassander occupied the west, Seleucus the east, Lysimachus the north, and Ptolemais the south.
And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Daniel chapter 11 verse 5.
The king of the south was Ptolemais, who ruled Egypt, and the king who is strong above him was Seleucus, who received Babylonia, the east side of Alexander's territory, and he was the king of north because Syrian region is located north from Egypt.
And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. Daniel chapter 11 verse 6.
Berenice, daughter of Ptolemy, married the Seleucid monarch Antiochus, who divorced his wife Laodice, and transferred the succession to Berenice's children. In 246 BC, when Ptolemy died, Antiochus took up again with his first wife, Laodice. Antiochus died shortly thereafter, many suspect from poisoning. Queen Berenice claimed the regency for her infant son, Antiochus. However, she and her son were both killed by Laodice.
But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail, and shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with the princes and with the precious vessels of silver and of gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. Daniel chapter 11 verses 7 to 9.
Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III, succeeded their father in 246 BC. He abandoned his predecessor's policy of keeping out of the wars of the other Macedonian successor kingdoms, and plunged into the Third Syrian War with the Seleucids of Syria, when his sister, Queen Berenice, and her son were murdered in a dynastic dispute. Ptolemy marched triumphantly into the heart of the Seleucid realm, as far as Babylonia, while his fleets in the Aegean made fresh conquests as far north as Thrace. This victory marked the zenith of the Ptolemaic power. Seleucus II kept his throne, but Egyptian fleets controlled most of the coasts of Asia Minor and Greece.
But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. Daniel chapter 11 verses 10 to 13.
This battle is known as Battle of Raphia or Battle of Gaza, between the forces of Ptolemy Philopator, king and pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt, and Antiochus III the Great of the Seleucid Empire. Ptolemy's victory secured the province of Colthyria for Egypt. Verse 12 said, "When he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up. And he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it." This is the story, Ptolemy persecuting Jews after he came back from the war, recorded in the book of 3 Maccabees. After Ptolemy's defeat of Antiochus III, in 217 BC at the Battle of Raphia, he visited Jerusalem and the Second Temple. However, he is miraculously prevented from entering the building. This leads him to hate the Jews, and upon his return to Alexandria, he rounds up all the Jews in the kingdom to put them to death in his hippodrome. Those Jews who agree to abandon their faith are to be spared. But it is said, in verse 13, "He shall not be strengthened by it, For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. Ptolemy's victory was only respite at the Battle of Panem in 200 BC. Antiochus defeated the army of Ptolemy's young son, Ptolemy Epiphanes, and recaptured whole Syria and Judea.
And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. Daniel chapter 11 verse 14.
It was not only the king of north attacked the king of the south at that time. While the Battle of Panem in 200 BC transferred whole Syria from Ptolemaic to Seleucid, Philip V of Macedon also attacked Egypt and seized several islands and places in Caria and Thrace control. And after this defeat, Egypt formed an alliance with the rising power in the Mediterranean, Rome. And it is said, the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision. Here, thy people refers to Jews, so the robbers of thy people should be Roman Empire. In 161 BC, Judea also made a treaty of amity with Rome, to fight against the invasion of the king of the north. However, as Rome intervened in the throne of the Jewish Empire, Judea became a state tributary of Rome in 63 BC, so it is said, they shall fall.
So far, the king of the south has been the center of the story. But from verse 15, the king of the north becomes the center.
So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mound, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. Daniel chapter 11 verses 15 to 16.
Here, the king of the north becomes Rome. Verse 14 introduced the rising power of Roman Empire. And in verse 17, the story of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra was clearly described. Therefore, the king of the north, from verse 15 becomes Julius Caesar. And because of that, this battle refers to the siege of Alexandria, in 48 BC. And it is said, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. The reason why Caesar came to Alexandria was to chase after Pompey, who conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC. And after Pompey's death, Julius Caesar ruled Judea. That's why conquering the glorious land is mentioned here.
He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Daniel chapter 11 verses 17 to 19.
After the battle of Pharsalus, between the forces of Caesar, and those of now Pompey Magnus, and the Senate, the majority of the forces, commanded by Pompey, were scattered or surrendered to Caesar. Pompey, however, escaped via Amphipolis to Egypt. But he was killed by Julius and Lucius Septimius, former soldiers in his army. The assassination was proposed by the advisors of the pharaoh Ptolemy, who deemed that Caesar would be pleased by the removal of his adversary. So the Bible said, in verse 17, he will determine to come with the might of his entire kingdom, and will make an alliance with the king of the south. And the Bible said, and he will give him a daughter in marriage, in order to overthrow the kingdom. Caesar then became involved with an Egyptian civil war, between the child pharaoh and his sister, wife, and Corrigan queen, Cleopatra. During his stay in the Alexandrian palace, he received 22-year-old Cleopatra, allegedly carried to him in secret wrapped in a carpet. She counted on Caesar's support to alienate Ptolemy. With the arrival of Roman reinforcements, and after the battles in Alexandria, Ptolemy was defeated at the Battle of the Nile. And Cleopatra became the sole ruler of Egypt. But after he died, Cleopatra took the side of Antony, who fought against Octavian, the successor of Caesar. So the Bible said, but his plans will not succeed or help him.
Then he will turn his attention to the coastlands and will take many of them, but a commander will put an end to his insolence and will turn his insolence back on him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Daniel chapter 11 verses 18 to 19.
While the civil war in Rome continues, The king of Pontus, Berenices II, using the opportunity, made himself the ruler of Chalcis and Lesser Armenia. Pontus was located south of the Black Sea, Chalcis was on the west of the Black Sea, and the Lesser Armenia was under Pontus. This area is called Galatia. It's the current Turkey region. The ruler of Galatia appealed to a lieutenant of Caesar in Asia for help, and soon, the Roman army fought with Berenices, and the Roman army was defeated. But soon Caesar arrived, and battle took place near Zela, and Caesar easily defeated Berenices. This was the famous battle that Caesar wrote about to a friend in Rome, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. On his way to Pontus, Caesar visited Tarsus from 27 to May 29, 47 BC. Tarsus was located in the Mediterranean region, where Cleopatra and Antony met, and also is the place Paul was born. So the places included in Caesar's expedition were all near the Black Sea and the Mediterranean coast. That's why the Bible said that he would go to island or coastal areas. After that, Caesar turned his face toward the fort of his own land, to quell the rebellion of Pompey's supporters. A commander will put an end to his insolence, and will turn his insolence back on him. Here the commander refers to Pompey. Even though he was already dead, but his followers continued to rebel.
Caesar goes to the ancient city of Thapsus, an ancient city in Tunisia, North Africa, to defeat the supporters of Pompey. In there, the Republican forces of the Optimates were decisively defeated by the veteran forces loyal to Julius Caesar. After that, in 45 BC, the final battle of Caesar's civil war against the leaders of the Optimates happened in South Hispania Ulteria, which is called the Battle of Munda. With the military victory at Munda and the deaths of Titus Labienus and Gnaeus Pompeius, eldest son of Pompey, Caesar was politically able to return in triumph to Rome and then govern as the elected Roman dictator. However, Caesar was assassinated on March 15, 44 BC, in the Senate. So the prophecy written in verse 19 was fulfilled. But he shall stumble and fall, and not be found.
Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger, nor in battle. Daniel 11:20-22.
After the death of Caesar, Octavian is handed over to the throne. He was also called as Caesar Augustus. He was the one who issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world, recorded in Luke chapter 2 verse 1, to collect taxes. Daniel chapter 11 also describes him as a tax collector, who shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, and as it is written, within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger, nor in battle. He died in peace without a war, shortly after he had issued the census.
And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Daniel chapter 11 verses 21-22.
After Augustus, Tiberius Caesar became the next king of Rome. The Bible described him as a vile person. Tiberius was not the royal blood of Augustus. He was a son of Livia with her former husband. Augustus didn't have a son, except the one adopted. So after the adopted son was dead, Livia made his son to become the successor, by flatteries. So the Bible said, he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. But he was hated by people, because he had no royal authority, and soon he was assassinated by the chief of his royal guard. Verse 22 describes his assassination, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him.
And it is said, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Because it said covenant, which refers to the promise between God and his people, the prince of the covenant should be Jesus Christ. As Tiberius was assassinated by his own guard, Jesus was sold by one of his disciples, and dead by his chosen people. Jesus died 6 years before Tiberius was assassinated. The king of the south and the king of the north.
From verse 1 to 14, the king of the north was the one who occupied Syria, and the king of the south was who controlled Egypt. But from verse 15, the king of the north becomes the Roman Empire, not just limited to Syrian region. The last battle between Caesar and Pompey took place in central region of Greece. It had nothing to do with Syria. At that time Syrian region was also controlled by Rome, but Syria and Rome were not treated as the same country. The siege of Alexandria also had nothing to do with Syria.
The king of the south is not always Egypt also. Read Daniel chapter 11 verse 40 to 42. Verse 40 said, "The king of the south pushed him," and verse 42 said, "The land of Egypt shall not escape." So contextually the king of the south cannot be Egypt in these verses. If the king of the south is Egypt, then there is no reason why Egypt was not described as the place the king of the north directly attacked.
Where was Chittim, Macedonia or Cyprus? One of the most common ideas about where Chittim was, is that it was a city on the island of Cyprus. Historically it is said that Chittim was a tribe lived on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and there was a place called Chittim in Cyprus. But, according to Maccabees 1, there was also a place called Chittim in Macedonia, where Alexander the Great lived. However, in the time period of verse 30, the Chittim that was in Macedonia and was in Cyprus belongs to the same country, Eastern Roman Empire. Therefore, regardless of where the ships of Chittim was departed from, Macedonia or Cyprus, it was the Byzantium navy.
In what year did the following events happen?
At the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter, for the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Daniel chapter 11 verses 29 to 30.
What is the time appointed? Is this any personally decided time? No, it should be the time that's specified in the prophecy. That means, there should be a time mentioned previously regarding this prophecy. Verse 24 and 27 also talked about this time.
He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and reach. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Daniel chapter 11 verses 24, 27.
But the entire Daniel chapter 11 didn't tell us when the time appointed is. And there is another time period that the Bible didn't tell us when it is, that is 1260 days prophecy. It was mentioned at least 5 times in the Bible, but the starting time was never mentioned directly. So even Daniel, after hearing the prophecy of chapter 11, didn't understand and said, "And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things?" And Gabriel explained it again, but this time, with 2 additional information.
And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. Daniel chapter 12 verses 11 to 12.
According to the 2300 years of prophecy, written in Daniel chapter 8 and 9, the end of 2300 years is also the end of the entire Daniel's prophecy. So the 2300 years and the 1335 years should end in the same year. So by subtracting 1335 from 2300, we can get the starting year of 1290 years. But there is something strange about how Gabriel explained those 2 additional time periods. When the 2300 years of prophecy was explained, the longest period was introduced first, and small subdivisions, such as 7 weeks and 62 weeks, were calculated from the period, but this time, the order was reversed. The smaller period, the 1290 years, was mentioned first, and the longer one, the 1335 years, later. This change could imply possibility that the combination of subdivisions might not equal to the main division. But, for now, we will take the year 509 as the starting year of 1290 years, and check if that year was truly the time that the daily was taken away, and the abomination of desolate was set up.
And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up, and shall become strong with a small people. Daniel chapter 11 verse 23.
The king who can meet the description of verse 23 is the king, Clovis first. Clovis was the founder both of the Merovingian dynasty, and of a powerful Frankish kingdom. During his reign, he turned this kingdom from a small power in Flanders into a major kingdom, that stretched from Aquitaine to the Rhine and English Channel, as the Bible said, "He shall become strong with a small people." And it is said, "And after the league made with him he shall work deceitfully." The previous king of the north was Roman Empire, so him that Clovis made agreement is Rome. Historians have assumed that Childeric and his son Clovis were both commanders of the Roman military in the province of Belgica Secunda, and were subordinate to the Magister Militum. Clovis later turned against the Roman commanders, defeated Syagrius. As the result, the remnants of the Western Roman Empire were destroyed. This shows how Clovis broke the league with Rome, and how deceitfully he expanded his kingdom.
He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and reach. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Daniel chapter 11 verse 24.
English historian Edward Gibbon would write on Clovis's early conquest of Gaul. When he first took the field, he had neither gold and silver in his coffers, nor wine and corn in his magazines, but he imitated the example of Caesar, who in the same country had acquired wealth by the sword, and purchased soldiers with the fruits of conquest. After each successful battle or expedition, the spoils were accumulated in one common mass. Every warrior received his proportionable share, and the royal prerogative submitted to the equal regulations of military law. The untamed spirit of the barbarians was taught to acknowledge the advantages of regular discipline. At the annual review of the month of March, their arms were diligently inspected, and when they traversed a peaceful territory, they were prohibited from touching a blade of grass. The justice of Clovis was inexorable, and his careless or disobedient soldiers were punished with instant death. And when Clovis became king, most of the region was dominated by Salus Frank, so the locals could live in peace. So the Bible said, "He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province."
Those who eat from the king's provisions will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away, and many will fall in battle. The two kings, with their hearts bent on evil, will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail, because an end will still come at the appointed time. Daniel chapter 11 verses 26 to 27.
Around the year 500, Clovis was implicated in the civil war of Burgundians between two brother kings, Gundobad and Go-Jessel. Gundobad has already killed his two other brothers to protect his throne, but he saved his youngest one, who was the king of Geneva. Clovis fought for the younger brother, Go-Jessel, and defeated Gundobad's army. Gundobad fled to Avignon and Clovis laid siege to the city, but Clovis decided to accept the tribute of allegiance from Gundobad, and returned home with a great deal of plunder.
This civil war between two Burgundian kings is clearly prophesied in Daniel chapter 11 verses 25 to 26. The king of the south in these verses refers to the king of Burgundians, Gundobad. Godegisel was Gundobad's brother, who ate from the king's provisions, and who tried to destroy him. But he was swept away, and many fell in battle, including Godegisel himself. After Clovis left, Gundobad killed his rebellious brother, Godegisel. The English historian Edward Gibbon wrote that the allegiance of his brother was already seduced, and the obedience of Godegisel, who joined the royal standard with the troops of Geneva, more effectually promoted the success of the conspiracy.
And the Bible said, "But to no avail." This statement is from the standpoint of Clovis, not from Go-Jessel. The real objective for Clovis fighting with Go-Jessel was not to replace the king of Burgundy, but to destroy and conquer the country, and so the Bible said that Clovis will return and try again.
An end will still come at the appointed time.
The next war Clovis fought involving Burgundian was the war with Visigoths, between 507 and 508. In this battle, Clovis was in alliance with Gundobad, but at the end of the war, Clovis revealed what he had in his mind about Burgundian. In 508, Clovis leaves the battlefield, leaving the Gundobad's army alone, and soon the reinforcements sent by Ostrogoth arrived, and destroyed the Burgundians' army. So finally that Clovis had in mind for Burgundian has happened at the appointed time. From this tragedy, the Burgundian kingdom began to lose its power, and in 534, after it was defeated by Frank, Burgundy becomes a part of the Frank Empire.
Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits, and return to his own land. Daniel chapter 11 verse 28.
And on the way to his own land, Clovis does something unusual. The Bible said, "His heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits." And also verse 30 stated that he will do something similar again. "For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do. He shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant."
According to the Bible, Clovis will go against the Holy Covenant after those two battles. That shows that his decision was related to the outcome of those wars, and because Bible pointed out that it was his own personal decision, made with his heart, not discussed with any others, and stated that 2 times. We can see that it is about what he is going to do personally, and it will make a significant outcome for the history related to the daily sacrifice and setting up the abomination of Desolate.
The conversion of Clovis.
There is a theory that the year Clovis was converted to Catholicism was 496 AD, but it's not historically accurate. It's more likely a legend. Some say that after Clovis won the battle in 496, he and 1,000 other Frankish people were baptized into a Catholic church. But most historian believes that this story was a legend rather than a historical record, and the real date Clovis was baptized was on the Christmas day in 508. In 496, there were serious conflicts going on between Arianism and Catholicism, and the people living in those German regions, including most parts of the Frankish kingdom, believed in the Arianism. So in his early time of conquest, it should not be possible and practical for Clovis to get baptized to Catholicism suddenly, ignoring the majority of Arianism believers in his country. And in even 508, his baptism was held in a small church only with close associates. At the time appointed he shall return, and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the Holy Covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. Daniel chapter 11 verses 29 to 30.
Finally the time appointed has come. We've assumed that the time appointed is around 509, by subtracting 1335 from 2300. In this year, the Bible said, Clovis, the king of the north, will march toward the south again. The king of the south here, as it is mentioned before, is not Egypt, which was at that time a part of Byzantium Empire, so the south in the verse refers to Visigoths. In this march, Clovis again faced a difficulty to defeat the Visigoths, for the ships of Chittim shall come against him. The Bible didn't say that Clovis and the ships of Chittim had a battle, but it just said that it shall come against him. Clovis knew that he would not be able to match with the ships of Chittim, which was Byzantium navy. So he grieved, and returned back to his land. The year Clovis marched into Visigoths was 507. In the Battle of Wuil, Clovis killed the king of Visigoths, Alaric II, and conquered Toulouse. By the end of 507, Frank and Burgundian army laid siege to Arles, and this siege continued until the year 508. But suddenly, in 508, Clovis returned to Tours, leaving only the Burgundian alliance, which became a tragedy for Burgundian, because the reinforcements sent by the king of Ostrogoth, Theodoric, totally destroyed them.
The year Clovis marched south is 507, and when he returned back because of the ships of Chittim was 508. So we can see that it was 508 when he forsake the Holy Covenant, and because the Bible treated the entire events of verse 29 and 30 as what should happen at the time appointed, this entire period should be treated as one time unit.
According to some historians, the reason why Byzantium navy was hovering off the Italian shore around the time of the battle was to give pressure to Ostrogoth, but that does not mean that they were there to help Clovis. Clovis is the one who deceitfully broke the league with Rome, and destroyed the remaining army of the Western Roman Empire. But, on the contrary, Ostrogoth was considered as a subordinate state of Byzantium Empire at that time, so the real purpose of Byzantium navy was to contain the expansion of Clovis, not to delay Ostrogoth army. So, the year that the ships of Chittim appeared, and the time Clovis was converted to Catholic, and when Burgundian army was finally fatally wounded, were the year 508. Therefore we could learn that the time appointed should be 508, not 509.
And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Daniel chapter 11 verse 31.
What Clovis did after he returned to his land well explains what forsaking the Holy Covenant means.
Clovis is also significant due to his conversion to Christianity in 496, largely at the behest of his wife Clotilde, who would later be venerated as a saint for this act, celebrated today in both the Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox Church. Clovis eventually converted to Catholicism following the Battle of Ptolemaic on Christmas Day 508 in a small church in the vicinity of the subsequent Abbey of St. Remy in Reims. A statue of his baptism by St. Remigius can still be seen there. The details of this event have been passed down by Gregory of Tours, who recorded them many years later in the 6th century. The adoption by Clovis of Catholicism, as opposed to the Arianism of most other Germanic tribes, led to widespread conversion among the Frankish peoples, to religious unification across what is now modern-day France, Belgium and Germany, and 3 centuries later to Charlemagne's alliance with the Bishop of Rome, and in the middle of the 10th century under Otto I the Great to the consequent birth of the early Holy Roman Empire.
The starting time for 1260 year of prophecy.
And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and sware by him that liveth for ever that it shall be for times, and an half, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified, and made white, and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,335 days. Daniel chapter 12 verses 7 to 12.
2 events and 2 time periods.
The Bible didn't directly mention about the start time for 1260 years of prophecy. However, we can find the end time according to Daniel chapter 12 verse 7 to 12. Verse 7 talks about 2 different events. First one is having 1260 years of time of persecution, and the second is the scattering the power of the holy people, and about what will happen at the end of the scattering of the holy people. Verse 10 said, Many shall be purified, and made white, and tried. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise shall understand. Through the 1260 years of persecution, God's people might be purified, white, and tried. But there is one unusual thing: none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise shall understand. According to the context of chapter 12, what the wise will understand is about the prophetic time of 1260, 1290 and 1335 days. It is true that persecution could bring purification, and the end should come with victory and freedom of God's people. At the end of 1260 years, in 1798, the power of the persecution, the papacy, came down by French Revolutionary Army, by capturing the Pope, and by the time the persecution ends, many Christians were able to achieve the religious freedom. The end of papal power became the victory of God's people. But the Bible also said that it will also finish with the total scatterings of God's people, and they will understand what these prophetic time periods are about. So, we can see that there are 2 different ends that these descriptions are applied to. The end of 1260 years and the end of 2300 years. And the scattering of God's people, and the understanding of the prophetic time periods will not happen at the end of 1260 years. It will happen at the end of 1335 years, which is the end of 2300 years also. To make us understand better, 2 additional time periods are added, 1290 and 1335 days, 1290 years connected to 1260 years, and 1335 years to 2300 years. And what Daniel wanted to understand was when the end of these wonders is.
And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? Daniel chapter 12 verse 6.
So the end of 1290 years should be same with the end of 1260 years.
The year that the ships from Chittim appeared was 508. And so it was also the year 508 when Clovis took away the daily sacrifice and placed the abomination that makes desolate. So 1290 added to 508 makes 1798, which also should be end of 1260 years. Then the starting year of 1260 years becomes 538. Who was the persecuting power?
The Bible clearly suggested that the God's people will be persecuted during 1260 years. Then there should be a persecutor who will lose its strength in 1798. And the persecutor should be a religious power, because it will speak the great words against the Most High.
And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Daniel chapter 7 verse 25.
It is the one whose deadly wound was healed.
And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon who gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Revelation chapter 13 verses 3 to 5.
42 months, in verse 5, are 1260 days. So the beast in verse 4 refers to the same persecuting power of 1260 years. It is said that who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking things and blasphemies. Therefore this beast is a religious power who controlled medieval dark ages for 1260 years until 1798. In the history of Europe until 1798, the country that existed two times, once as a regular nation and then as a religious power, is Rome. The first one is the Roman Empire and the second one is Holy Roman Empire that controlled by papacy. During the 1260 years of persecution, many gospel workers stood up, like Martin Luther, and discovered and preached the everlasting doctrine of the righteousness by faith, even though many of them were put to death. But eventually this gospel movement formed the Protestant Church, which symbolizes protesting against the Roman Catholics, by believing the Bible as the only words of God, and the doctrine of righteousness by faith only.
What was the daily? And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Daniel chapter 11 verse 31.
Most of the Bible translations translated it as daily sacrifice. But the word sacrifice is not in the original language. It was added by translators unnecessarily. Without the word sacrifice, the daily means continual, something that has been happening every day. So, taking away the daily means what Clovis changed that has been lasting until that time. That was his conversion to Catholicism. His baptism to Catholicism changed him and his country from pagan to papacy, and by doing that Clovis has prepared for the coming of the papal power to become the Holy Roman Empire.
508 and 509.
Then why the year 509, which we got from subtracting 1335 from 2300, cannot be the starting year of 1290 years? To understand this, we must first see how the 70-year prophecy was applied.
And the elders of the Jews built, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they built and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. Ezra chapter 6 verses 14 to 15.
The 70 years was from 606 BC to 536 BC. 536 BC was the time that the decree was issued first time. After that there were 2 more decrees were issued, to make it clear which decree should be considered as a valid one to count from. A special instruction was given in Ezra chapter 6, which said that all 3 decrees should be counted as one decree. That means, the entire time periods of those 3 decrees should be combined, and form one dividing time unit.
If a dividing point forms a period of time, then it forms 2 dividing points, the starting and ending point. If there is a period of time before the dividing unit, then the starting time of the dividing unit becomes the ending time of the period. And if there is one after the unit, then the ending time of the dividing unit becomes the starting time of that period. This shows the possibility that there might be a dividing time unit that includes a period of time in the period of 1,335 years.
Revelation chapter 11 proves that 1,260 years of persecution finishes in 1798.
The fact that 1,260 years should end in 1798 is also proven by the book of Revelation chapter 11. In verse 7 it is said, "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them, for 3 days and a half." The 1260 years as the time of tribulation for God's people is mentioned 5 times in the Bible. So we know that after the 1260 years is finished there should be no more direct persecution. Therefore this 3.5 days of tribulation should happen before the 1260 years is over. Therefore the time when they shall have finished their testimony should be right before the 1260 years is finished. According to the history, the 3.5 years of tribulation occurred from November 21, 1793 to June 17, 1797 for about 3.5 years by the French revolutionary government.
And this is also important to know that the tribulation from the papacy and from the pagan power of the French Revolution were included in the 1260 years, treated as one power of persecution.
Therefore, it is sure that the 1260 years of persecution ends in 1798. And on February 20, 1798 the Pope was captured by the French Revolutionary Army and was put into prison, marking the beginning of the fall of papacy. His final destruction came on August 29, 1799, when he died in the prison, which marked the end of the papal power. If you count 1260 years from December 25, 508, it comes to the Christmas Day in 1798, which is about in the middle of Pope's capture and death. And because the fall of the papacy, the arrest and the death of Pope forms a period of time, a chain of events, we need to take it as one unit. So the end of 1290 years should fall in 1798, and the rest of the years to the end of 2300 years should be counted from 1799. Therefore we could realize why the 70-year prophecy was mentioned in connection to the decree of reconstruction of Jerusalem. So now we can find out the beginning year of the 1260 years by calculating back from 1798, which comes to the year 538. Then, why didn't Bible directly informed us the starting time of 1260 years? Because by learning the nature of what had been happening until the year of 538, we can find out the identity of the persecuting power.
What happened prior to the year 538?
And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Daniel chapter 7 verses 24 to 25.
It is said that the persecuting power will arise after the 10 horns were risen, which was after the fall of Western Roman Empire. And he shall subdue 3 kings. The year the Western Roman Empire was fallen was 476. So the persecution should begin after 476 and after those 3 kings were subdued. So we should find out who these 3 kings were, and how they were subdued. After the fall of Western Roman Empire, the Western Europe was occupied by pagan Germans and other northern tribes, who soon adopted Arianism as the main religion, which made serious conflicts with Catholic Church.
Who were the fallen 3 kings?
These 3 kings were all Arianism believers, who conquered Rome once, and also related to the fall of Western Roman Empire. The fall of these 3 kings occurred around the same time the Frankish kingdom was fast expanding, and made an important religious foundation for building the Holy Roman Empire later. The purpose of subduing these 3 kings was not to establish a new kingdom, but was to replace the ruler of the countries, to those who had the same faith with Catholics. Among the 3 kings, the first one fallen was Heruli. In 476, Odoacer, leading an army composed of Herulian, Rugian, and Syrian tribes, defeated the Roman army of Flavius Orestes, who was ruling Rome at that time, and that caused the fall of Western Roman Empire. But in 493, Odoacer was defeated by Theodoric of Ostrogoth, and Rome falls under the rule of Ostrogoth.
The destruction of Heruli is similar to that of Clovis on the siege of Arles. At the time, Odoacer was involved in the military conflict between 2 Roman generals, Ilus and Zeno. Ilus asked Odoacer for help for the war against Zeno, and so Odoacer invaded the Zeno's territory. So Zeno asked Rugi to help him, but Odoacer defeated the Rugi. But Zeno also appointed the Ostrogoth Theodoric the Great to help him. So Theodoric invaded Italy in 489, and by August 490 had captured almost the entire peninsula, and Odoacer was killed. The conflicts between two Roman generals started the wars, but the war resulted in the death of Odoacer and the fall of Heruli. It was like how Clovis' retreat has caused the destruction of his allies. The civil war of the East Roman Empire made neighboring nations fight and destroy each other. Odoacer and Theodoric were both Arianism believers.
Vandals. The second king was the Vandals, who also had Arian faith. Vandals were pushed all the way to the Spanish coast by the mercenary soldiers hired by Rome, but there they grew up as a shipbuilding country. In 430, they invaded North Africa, where the Roman army was dominated. In 439 they invaded Carthage and Sicily. In 440, during these invasions, the conflicts between Arianism and Catholicism increases. In 455 AD, the Vandals conquers Rome, but in 533 Vandals was defeated by the Eastern Roman Empire's navy, and the entire Vandal population was almost disappeared by the year of 534.
Ostrogoth. It was the year 560 that Ostrogoth was completely collapsed, but the beginning of the fall began from the time of the first siege of Rome. The first siege of Rome during the Gothic War lasted for a year and 9 days, from the 2nd of March 537 to the 12th of March 538. The city was besieged by the Ostrogothic army under the king Vitiges. The defending East Romans were commanded by Belisarius, one of the most famous and successful Roman generals. The siege was the first major encounter between the forces of the two opponents, and played a decisive role in the subsequent development of the war.
The structure of the prophecy announcing the beginning of the fall.
When the Bible prophecy talks about the fall of a country, it uses a period of time, not a specific point of time, to indicate the completion of the fall. One of the examples of using this method could be the coming of the stone nation, written in Daniel chapter 2. Here, the destruction of the world by the stone was treated as the beginning of the time of the judgment, so the complete destruction was described by a period of time, not by a point of time.
And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Daniel chapter 2 verse 44.
Daniel chapter 7 is also using the same method. The starting of the judgment was considered as the completion of taking away his dominion unto the end.
But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. Daniel chapter 7 verse 26.
Chapter 11 also used the same way of expression, to announce the complete fall of a kingdom.
He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Daniel chapter 8 verse 25. He shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel chapter 11 verse 45. Subduing 3 kings at the beginning of 1260 years.
The Bible didn't say that the beginning of the 1260 year would be on the specific day of the complete destruction of the 3 kings, and never mentioned in detail what will happen on the starting year of the 1260 years. Therefore, the purpose of mentioning about the collapse of these 3 kings was to tell us what power and what issue will be involved at the start time of the persecution. We have learned that both the 1290 years and the 1260 years finish on the same year, so we could figure out the year 538 from subtracting 1260 from 1798, but we were wondering why it should be the year 538. It seems like there were no important historical events happened in that year. But this uncertainty was the very reason why the Bible didn't tell us about that. The Bible wants us to figure out what was the leading power, and what were the political and religious issues happening at that time that drew the world into a religious persecution.
The major event happened in 538 was the siege of Rome.
If we look at the year 538, the major event happened at that time was the siege of Rome. It was the battle between Eastern Roman Empire and Ostrogoth. The battle place was Rome, Italy. By these information we can also make a guess that the fall of the other 2 kings must be related to similar situation. And by looking at the results of the wars, we could learn the object of the wars. All these 3 kings once have conquered Rome. However, the state of Rome was not changed much. They didn't demolish Rome to start a new nation with new people. Only the rulers of the Italian peninsula were changed. And later, the Italian area, including Rome, became subjugated to the kingdom of the Frank. So we can see that the goal of subduing these 3 kings was not about reconstructing Western Roman Empire, but more about who rules the country, Arianism believers or Catholic believers.
And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil, many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Daniel chapter 11 verses 33 to 35.
During the medieval Dark Ages, those who understood the Bible truth, such as Martin Luther, preached the gospel to many, but many Christians were put to death and pains for many days. But toward to the end of the 1260 years, some helps were provided to them. Many people could be able to move to America for religious freedom, and in 1776, America became independent. And on June 17, 1797 the Religious Freedom Act was passed in France, but it is said many shall cleave to them with flatteries.
Verse 35 said, And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed.
Daniel chapter 12 also explains what the people of understanding will do at the end of the appointed time.
Many shall be purified, and made white, and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,335 days. Daniel chapter 12 verses 10 to 12.
The time of the end in Daniel chapter 12 refers to the end of the 1335 years, which is also the end of 2300 years. So the time of the end in Daniel chapter 11 verse 35 also refers to the end of 1335 years, which is 1844. From 1798 to 1844 there are 46 years, so it is not practical to consider the possibility that the Christians who survived from the 1260 years of persecution lived until 1844 and experienced being purified, and made white, and tried, and have understandings of what happened at the end of 2300 years. Therefore there should be a special event happened between 1798 and 1844.
And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones, and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Daniel chapter 11 verses 36 to 39.
Verse 35 finishes in 1798, the end of 1260 years. So the king who fits into the description is France. The Frank Empire was the main character until verse 32 and was the beginning of modern France. So the king refers to Napoleon Bonaparte. Many of these descriptions could also apply to Roman Catholicism, which shows that the papal and the atheistic power come from the same source, and that gave us an important hint how this new power, started from the Catholic Frank, will be reappear in our time.
Verse 36 said, And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. It is about the French revolutionary government who banned all religions and exalted himself above God. And it said that he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. What was determined is what is to be done on the time appointed, which is what France will do on the end of 1,260 years to stop the papal power. French revolutionary government disregarded the God of his fathers, the Catholicism, and the desire of women by allowing free divorce and creating feminist movement that eventually crashed the healthy family structure. And they enforced the Reign of Terror. Between June 1793 and the end of July 1794, there were 16,594 official death sentences in France, of which 2,639 were in Paris, and put a live woman as the new god of the cult of reason.
Verse 39 said, Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange god, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Shortly after Bonaparte's return from facing Ibrahim came Muhammad's birthday, which was celebrated with great pomp. Bonaparte himself directed the military parades for the occasion, preparing for this festival in the Sheik's house wearing oriental dress and a turban. It was on this occasion that the Divan granted him the title Ali Bonaparte, after Bonaparte proclaimed himself a worthy son of the Prophet, and favorite of Allah. Around the same time, he took severe measures to protect pilgrim caravans from Egypt to Mecca, writing a letter himself to the governor of Mecca. And the French Revolution also brought a new era in the history of land reform, that the land of the great landlord was confiscated, distributed to common people.
And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel chapter 11 verses 40-45.
The time of the end of the appointed time.
The time of the end, in verse 40, does not refer to the starting time of the last days. It refers to the end time of the given time period, which is the 1260 years. In Matthew 24, Jesus talked about the destruction of Jerusalem, as if it was for the end of the world. But these signs Jesus mentioned did not only happen at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, but also at the time of the 1260 years, and also at the end of 2300 years, and they will happen again before the end of the world. So, the term, the time of the end, cannot be used as a starting time of the last days, just because it contains the word end. We need to look at these terms contextually, according to how it is used. Daniel chapter 11 and 12 has been focused to the end time of the 1260 and 1290 years, so contextually the time of the end should be the ends of these periods, which is 1798, and so 1798 cannot be a starting time of the last days also.
Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Matthew 24:29. It is said that immediately after the tribulation the stars shall fall from heaven, but according to the history there was a historical eclipse happened on May 19, 1780, that was before the tribulation was over. And the meteor showers was on November 12 and 13, 1833, which is 5 years later from 1798. Therefore the signs of the last days that Jesus talked about cannot be used to define 1798 as the starting year of last days. Furthermore, the 1798 is the last year of the given period, not the starting year of a new period, just like December 31st is the last day of a year, not the first day of the next year. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. Daniel chapter 11 verse 40.
At the time of the end, in 1798, the king of the south will push at the king of the north. The word push at was not used to describe a direct attack or battle in the book of Daniel. It should be interpreted as creating indirect conflicts. That means, in 1798, the king of the south must be enforcing a policy that triggered the king of the north to come against him.
The king of the north came with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. That means the army and the navy were all mobilized. And it is said that he will enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. That means the king of the north will pass over some countries on the way to the battlefield, which is re-explained in verse 41. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon.
The glorious land, mentioned in verse 41, refer to Israel, and Edom, Moab, and Ammon regions are located near the way to Israel from Egypt. The order how these three regions are mentioned shows that the king of the north moved from Egypt to Israel. The Libyans and the Ethiopians mentioned in verse 43 are located west and south from Egypt. Therefore the king of the south mentioned in verse 40 should be Egypt. But if you read verse 42, it looks like the main target of this attack of the king of the north might not Egypt, because Egypt was described as an additional country that the king of the north will enter.
He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape.
If the king of the south in verse 40 is Egypt, then it cannot be described using the word also. Then, why is the Bible using this conflicting description? We can learn the answer if we look at the political situation of the time. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte went for campaign in Egypt and Syria. The goal of the campaign was not just conquer Egypt, but was to prevent the expansion and the trade of England with India through Egypt. That is why the verse 40 used the words, push at him, because Egypt didn't really attack France directly. But as a result of this expedition, Napoleon took many treasures of Egypt to France, as the Bible said, but he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. However, at that time, Egypt was under Ottoman Empire, and in 1799 Ottoman declares war against Napoleon, so Napoleon marched into Palestine in 1799 to fight with Ottoman, and successfully conquered Jaffa, but he failed to conquer Acre, a city in northern Israel. And it is said that the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps, which refers to the reintroduction of slavery by Napoleon.
In Paris, on the 4th of February 1794, Abbe Grégoire and the Convention ratified this action by officially abolishing slavery in all French territories outside mainland France, freeing all the slaves both for moral and security reasons. Napoleon came to power in 1799 and soon had grandiose plans for the French sugar colonies. To achieve them he reintroduced slavery. Slavery in the French colonies was finally abolished only in 1848, 3 months after the beginning of the revolution against the July monarchy.
Verse 44 shows the beginning of the fall of Napoleon. On June 24, 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia, but he failed the expedition, and exiled by the Allied governments to Elba, following his abdication at Fontainebleau, and landed on the island on May 4, 1814.
But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. Verse 44. The tidings out of the east and out of the north refer to the War of the Sixth Coalition, a coalition of Austria, Prussia, Russia, the United Kingdom, Portugal, Sweden, Spain and a number of German states that defeated France and drove Napoleon into exile on Elba. These countries are located east and north from France. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel chapter 11 verse 45.
Napoleon's coronation took place on December 2, 1804. 2 separate crowns were brought for the ceremony, a golden laurel wreath recalling the Roman Empire and a replica of Charlemagne's crown. In 1812, Napoleon said, "That I am a true Roman emperor. I am of the best race of the Caesars." Those who are founders.
Declaring himself as the true ruler of the Roman Empire, Napoleon revealed the implicative connection between Rome and himself in philosophical and political goals. That also explains why the French Revolution was described very similar to Roman Catholics.
The crown of Charlemagne was used by the kings of the Frank Empire, and the crown was used by the kings of France after 1237. So that Napoleon was crowned as a king of the Frank Empire shows Napoleon as a king of the Frank also. So, the use of the words "the king" in verse 36 was intended to point out that this king is the king of the previous country. Receiving the golden laurel wreath, recalling the Roman Empire, is in the same line of Napoleon becoming the king of Italy. The Italian Empire was founded on March 17, 1805 by Napoleon. For the former Italian Republic, Napoleon was also the king. Napoleon received the crown on May 26 at Milan. The crown was called the Iron Crown of Lombardia, which symbolizes the Kingdom of Lombardia. And also Napoleon's son was the King of Rome.
Napoleon becoming the King of Italy fulfills the prophecy in verse 45, "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain." This palace was in between the seas in the mountain that is called glorious holy. So these seas are not oceans, but lakes or waters in a mountain called holy.
We can find the place that's satisfying these description, which is in accord contextually with the previous verses, that is to the Sacri Monti of Piedmont in Lombardy, located at Milan, Italy. It is located in the Sacri Monti, in the region of Lombardy, which is the same place, included in the name of the Iron Crown of Lombardy. All these descriptions clearly show the identity, who is the king of the north described from verse 40.
Thank you for watching Bible Space Time.